Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland and AXA Insurance, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Agriland journalist Aisling O'Brien. We have a few things to get through this week, including the Common Agricultural Policy. Firstly, the Department of Agriculture has published the list of CAP beneficiaries for the 2024 financial year. That's an annual list of beneficiaries under CAP, and you can check out our article from earlier in the week on Agriland.ie and the Agriland app. CAP was also a big talking point at the meeting of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Agriculture this week. This was the first meeting of the committee under the current Dáil term, with a number of new faces both on the committee and in the hot seat, with Minister Martin Hayden making his first appearance at the committee as a senior minister. A range of issues came up, with CAP chief among them. Aisling, what were the key takeaways?
Yeah, definitely, Charles. So as you said, the future of CAP and what that budget might look like into the future has been very much to the fore in recent weeks. And the European Commission is understood to be planning a radical overhaul of the EU's long-term budget. That's also called the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, or the MFF. And you're going to hear an awful lot more about that over the coming weeks, because we're going to get a clearer picture in July of what that might look like. So what they're proposing, we believe, is that the funding to member states would be consolidated into a single funding pot, with the member states then developing a plan to outline how they would use that funding. And of course, that has sparked huge concern that the two-pillar structure that currently exists under the CAP would, I suppose, be brought into this single fund. And this could cause, I suppose, great concern that that funding could be maybe eroded away, or it might not be ring-fenced for what it's intended for. And of course, we have seen demonstrations by farm organisations here at home and across the EU outlining concerns about this. And the matter was discussed as well this week at the Agri-Fish Council, which comprises of all of the EU agriculture ministers, including Minister Martin Hayden. And as you said, the future of the CAP beyond 2027 was among the main talking points at the Joint Oireachtas Committee for Agriculture this week. And as you said, Minister Martin Hayden taking to the hot seat for the very first time in his role as Minister for Agriculture. And similar to his comments at the Agri-Fish Council, the Minister reaffirmed his commitment to the traditional two-pillar structure of the CAP, and he was quizzed on this by Roscommon Galway TD Michael Fitzmaurice. Have a listen.
In CAP, the overall budget in CAP in Europe, is it going to be bigger, yes or no? Is Ireland's budget going to be bigger to accommodate if we're going to have tweaking around in it? Second of all, are we going to have Pillar 1 and Pillar 2? Is it going to be the same system? Them are just the three straight questions I want answered.
Apologies, Deputy, I left my crystal ball at home, so I don't have that, and we'd all love to know those answers. What I can tell you is we'll know in the middle of July. Around the 16th of July is when these elements are going to be announced. And all I can tell you is we are doing everything in our power. I can't be clearer. I want to maintain the single fund. I want to maintain Pillar 1 and 2. We want a fully funded CAP. Will we get that? I've outlined here really clearly. We know all the other demands there are.
And of course, those demands that Minister Hayden is referring to there, Charles, on the overall EU budget would include a call from a number of member states for increased defence spending, given the current geopolitical situation that we find ourselves in, and the various wars and tensions that are going on around the world and closer to European borders as well. And Deputy Fitzmaurice also asked if, in a situation where CAP in its traditional form wasn't going to be the case going forward, would the government here be prepared to step in and prop it up? And in response to that, the minister said that we could end up with many different scenarios. And he said if what has been leaked out about this single fund was to come about, he said that he would make the point that it would be a very bad thing, that it would mean renationalisation of the system, and he feels that would actually undermine the whole EU single market. Now, he said he wasn't going to get into predicting what might be the outcome, because he said there are many different outcomes that are at play here potentially at the moment. But he said what he could tell Deputy Fitzmaurice and the committee was that the government were making every effort to put their best foot forward to maintain a fully funded CAP with with the traditional structure that he said has served the farming sector so well. And he also noted in the second half of 2026, and it's something we've mentioned here on the podcast before, that of course the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU is coming to Ireland, which no doubt is going to make Minister Hayden very popular amongst his colleagues on the Agri-Fish Council as well, Charles. And I'm sure they'll all be putting their own spake in as to what they want for their own countries and their own countries' demands, because of course the European Union, it's not a carte blanche, it's not a blanket approach to agriculture, so many different farming systems, so many different concerns. But of course Minister Hayden said he's going to be using the bilateral meetings that he will have with his European colleagues, those agriculture ministers from other EU states, to, I suppose, outline Ireland's priorities as well. And I suppose that horse trading or cattle trading, however you want to put it, is going to be going on over the coming months ahead. But definitely CAP and what CAP is going to look like very much to the fore of everybody's minds here in Ireland and across Europe at the moment from a farming perspective.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to pay close attention to that, Aisling. But there was also an important update for farmers in the Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme, or ACRES, who may have applied for non-productive investments. What's the story there?
Yeah, so plenty of talking points at the committee. TB was discussed, but as you said, ACRES and the controversy around that agri-environmental scheme is, of course, always going to be a talking point when you've got a minister in the hot seat as well. So Minister Hayden said that it would be September at the latest before the payment system for the non-productive investments, or the NPIs, would be ready under ACRES. So when it comes to ACRES, we know there's the two streams, there's general and cooperation. And farmers in the cooperation project section of ACRES can undertake these NPIs to actually boost their payments. And these NPIs, they're small scale environmental actions available to farmers in this stream, which support nature friendly management of farms. And they, I suppose, are just something that farmers can avail of. And the Department of Agriculture said that they can add to their ACRES payment by up to a maximum of €17,500 over the 5-year period of the farmer's contract. So they are quite significant. And there has been 2 application windows for farmers to apply for these NPIs in 2023 and one last year again. But the payments system to support the submission of claims and the processing of the payments in respect of approved NPIs is not in place yet, which of course is a great sense of frustration to many farmers out there who've applied in goodwill and carried out work on their farm as well. Now, the department previously told us that the system would be in place this year, but Minister Hayden giving maybe more of a concrete time frame in response to questions from Fine Gael, Clare TD, Joe Cooney, and the Minister said that the focus has been at the moment about getting people their basic ACRES payment first and foremost. But he said that they are going to be looking at, the officials in the department are going to be working on this NPI issue, and they're making progress on this side, and they hope to have it resolved as soon as possible over the summer or September at the latest. And I suppose just looking at the broader picture of ACRES basic payments out there, the ministers previously said, of course, that the vast majority of payments in respect of farmers' participation in ACRES in 23 and 24 would be made by the end of this month, and the remaining more complex cases would be paid in June of this year. So we'll have to wait and see, Charles, and we'll be following that up with the department to see how many payments are left outstanding by the end of this month.
Well, just as we're talking about the cap, we'll just remind you that the closing date for the current round of TAMS investment applications is fast approaching. The department has previously confirmed that the deadline for applications under Tranche 7 of the scheme will be Friday, June 6th, so that will be Friday of next week. But moving on now, and US President Donald Trump has found his way back onto the Farming Week. Aisling, anytime Trump generates news for us here at Agriland, it tends to be news that can change very rapidly. But as of this moment in time, what's the latest on Trump and his tariffs?
Yes, Charles, that's true. So as with all of the stories connected to the Trump administration, we give the health warning here on the Farming Week that this information is what we know as we're recording right now, but things can change very, very quickly in the White House these days. So the latest update is that yesterday a federal court in the US blocked President Trump from imposing global tariffs, ruling that the president overstepped his authority in ordering the emergency additional taxes on imports. Now, the US Court of International Trade, which is based in Manhattan in New York, found that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 does not confer unbounded authority on the president to impose unlimited tariffs on goods from nearly every country. Now, the Trump administration immediately lodged notice of appeal, and the White House also questioned the authority of this court to make this ruling, and they said it was not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency. So it was a 3-judge panel, and they ruled that the worldwide and retaliatory tariffs announced by President Trump on April 2nd, which of course was dubbed Liberation Day by the president's administration, were contrary to law. And of course, President Trump cited emergency economic powers when he announced these sweeping tariffs. And I'm sure listeners are very familiar with that image of President Trump holding up that board in the Rose Garden of the White House, outlining what reciprocal tariffs would be applied to what country. But the court has said that the current legislation that's in place does not authorise any of the worldwide retaliatory or trafficking tariff orders. And they said that the tariff orders exceed any authority granted to the president under this legislation to regulate importation by means of tariffs. And the court noted that the Constitution actually assigns the US Congress the exclusive powers to lay and collect taxes, duties, imports and excises, and to regulate commerce with foreign nations. Now, the lawsuit was filed by an advocacy group, and it included small businesses that claimed they'd been severely impacted by these tariffs. So the court ruled in favour of a permanent injunction, Charles, which potentially halts the tariffs that have been imposed by President Trump, which include a 30% tariff on China, 25% on certain imports from Canada and Mexico, and a 10% universal tariff on most goods entering the US. Now, the ruling doesn't impact the 25% tariff imposed on autos, auto parts, steel or aluminium, which is actually subject to a different law. Now, this move, of course, comes as discussions continue between the US and its global trading partners, including the European Union, on the matter of tariffs. And earlier this week, President Trump said he would extend the deadline for a straight 50% tariff rate on the EU to July 9th. And that followed a call between Donald Trump and the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who had requested the US president to, I suppose, make an extension in this case and to allow for further discussions. So this is all, I suppose, we're not sure how the latest court ruling is going to impact on those negotiations at EU level, but we have had some reaction here at home from Taoiseach and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Simon Harris, who said that calm and measured dialogue represents the best way forward to resolving differences between the EU and the US in relation to tariffs. He said they noted the ruling of the US court in relation to the tariffs and the fact that that ruling is appealed, and he said that he wanted to stress the position once again that what is required for both sides is for the EU and the US to engage in calm and measured dialogue and to do so in good faith. And he said the continuing uncertainty over tariffs is a source of serious concern for businesses here in Ireland, but also across the EU and in the US as well. As we saw, it was US companies that took this court action, this legal action in the States. So it'll be really interesting to see how all this pans out, Charles. It could be updated as soon as we finish recording. Who knows?
But moving on now, and there was controversy this week sparked by comments from the Irish Road Haulage Association over tractors and motorways. What's this about, Aisling?
A huge reaction to this story, Charles. So on Monday, the Irish Road Haulage Association launched a campaign calling on the government to essentially kick tractors off the country's motorway network. And according to the president of the Irish Road Haulage Association, Ger Hyland, he said there are no good reasons to allow tractors to use the motorways. And the campaign aims, in the words of the Road Haulage Association, to highlight the dangers that tractors and slow-moving vehicles pose to other road users on the motorway network. Now, Hyland said that currently Ireland is the only country in the EU that allows tractors on motorways, and he believes that to prevent road deaths, tractors should be removed from the country's motorways. And he said that tractors cause a build-up of traffic behind them on the motorways. He said people are pulling into other lanes at the last minute to avoid a slow-moving tractor as well, and he said tractors are a regular sight on our motorways during the busy summer months, and sometimes they're pulling trailers of hay and silage bales or pulling slurry spreaders or other heavy machinery. And he said that a family in a car driving in heavy fog on the motorway at 120 kilometres per hour could come across this tractor and have very little time to react. And he said this is presenting a clear and present danger to other road users and is a serious tragedy waiting to happen. And members of the Road Haulage Association have also complained that their HGVs are getting stuck behind tractors and trailers, leading to congestion and dangerous manoeuvring on motorways as well. And the association has advised the government to heed the guidance issued by the Health and Safety Authority of Ireland, who said that as a general rule, farm tractors and machinery should not be driven on motorways as they create a serious hazard to other road users due to their slower speed. So I suppose it is an interesting point of view, and it did raise a lot of eyebrows, a lot of concern. We had a huge reaction to it on social media, Charles, and the Irish Farmers Association gave their reaction this week as well. They were not happy with this campaign, and they said they would oppose any move to ban the use of tractors on motorways. And Francie Gorman, the president of the IFA, pointed out that tractors that travel on motorways are equipped for speeds above 50 kilometres per hour, which is the legal requirement, while those with a lower speed are not allowed to travel on motorways. And he also said that in most cases, the journey farmers are undertaking is local, so the time that they actually spend on the motorway is short, and that many farm holdings are fragmented, so farmers actually need to use the motorway network to access parts of their holdings. And Gorman said that this attempt to ban tractors from the motorway network has nothing to do with road safety. Now, the Association of Farm and Forestry Contractors in Ireland, the FCI, also issued a statement saying that access for tractors to Ireland's motorway network is essential to agriculture and for road safety as well. And the association stressed the importance of maintaining tractor access to these routes for sustainability and for rural communities as well. The FCI said under the current legislation, it's only modern, roadworthy agricultural vehicles that would make use of motorways. And they said that a proposed ban on motorway use for tractors would put further pressure on other kinds of roads which already have a high volume of agricultural machinery on them during the summer months. And they said while the Irish Road Haulage Association cites safety concerns as a rationale for the proposed ban, the FCI is arguing that the presence of compliant tractors on motorways does not inherently compromise road safety. And they said instead the focus should be on enforcing existing speed and safety regulations for all vehicles to ensure a harmonious sharing of our road space. And they said if tractor access is restricted from motorways, it could lead to longer travel distances, increased fuel consumption and higher operational costs for farmers. And they said this not only impacts the agricultural economy but would also undermine environmental sustainability efforts as well by contributing to higher carbon emissions. And the FCI said that collaborative efforts should focus on enhancing road safety through education and enforcement rather than imposing blanket restrictions that could adversely affect the farming community. So a real talking point this week, Charles. And I know tractors on roads, they can cause a lot of debate depending on what road that is. But now it seems that debate is going on to the motorway network as well. But it'll be interesting to see what, if any, traction that campaign gets from the Irish Road Haulage Association.
We'll move on now, and this week saw an important report from the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, on greenhouse gas emissions across various sectors of the economy. Aisling, these EPA reports can often be a mixed bag in terms of what they say about Ireland's greenhouse gas reduction targets. I understand there was some positives for agriculture, but some caveats as well.
Yeah, that's for sure. So this greenhouse gas emissions projects report covering from 2024 to 2055 from the EPA shows that overall Ireland is projected to achieve a reduction of up to 23% in total greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. But that's compared to a national target, Charles, of 51%. And the EPA's projections show that full delivery of all climate action plans and policies could deliver this 23% reduction. And although emissions trends are going in the right direction, the EPA said the gaps in our European and national emissions reduction targets are now projected to be larger than last year. Now, the report found that total greenhouse gas emissions from the agriculture sector will range from a 1% increase to a 16% decrease from the period covering 2018 to 2030. Now, those projections are based on the level of adoption of measures contained in the Climate Action Plan, Agclimatise, and the GAEC Marginal Abatement Cost Curve, or MAC as it's commonly known. Now, the decrease in greenhouse gas emissions would potentially come from a variety of measures, we were told, including limits on nitrogen fertiliser use, switching to different fertilisers, and bovine feed additives as well. Now, Mary Frances Rochford is the EPA programme manager, Charles, and she acknowledged that the agriculture sector has made some progress in reducing emissions through the rollout of actions on nitrogen fertiliser, low emission slurry spreading technology, and the national liming programmes as well. And she added, in parallel to this, in line with the new research, the EPA refined the information underpinning the agricultural figures, which has led to a reduction in the overall agricultural emission estimates. Now, she said that this is now imperative that this research and this information is incorporated into updated carbon budgets and sectoral ceilings to ensure that they reflect the latest science, data and knowledge on greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland, and alignment with the national reduction target for the agriculture sector of 25%. She said, in the meantime, a direct comparison of the agricultural sector against its sectoral emission ceiling was no longer viable. So, as you mentioned, Charles, a game of two halves when it comes to this report. While there's been some progress acknowledged in the agriculture sector, the picture is much bleaker when it comes to the land use change and forestry sector, LULUCF, where greenhouse gas emissions are projected to increase by between 39 and 95% between 2018 to 2030. And this is mainly because forestry is reaching its harvesting age, and then it changes from being a carbon sink to actually being a carbon source. And the EPA said that planned policies and measures for the sector, such as increased deforestation, water table management on agricultural organic soils, and peatland rehabilitation, are projected to reduce the extent of the emissions increase as well. But even with the current planned measures, the EPA says it's unlikely that Ireland is going to meet this sector's European commitments. Now, the Minister for Climate, Environment and Energy, Darragh O'Brien, said that the latest projections from the EPA are a clear signal that while there has been progress, we need to move faster to meet our climate targets by the end of this decade. And he said the government is fully aware of the scale of the climate challenge and the importance for Ireland to be a leader in accelerating climate change. And he said we're undergoing a renewables-led energy transformation in this country, and it's estimated that renewables provided 40% of our electricity demand in 2024. Now, that, I suppose, didn't hold much water with the Social Democrats TD and the party's spokesperson on the environment and climate, Jennifer Whitmore, and she said that the government is delusional if it believes that Ireland won't face billions of euros in EU fines for missing its targets, its climate targets by 2030. And she said despite dire warnings from the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council and the Climate Change Advisory Council that Ireland could face fines of up to 26 billion euro for missing our targets, the government continues to be in denial, with the Taoiseach recently dismissing these fears as highly speculative. And she said the report represents a major setback for our climate ambitions. And she said, how many more wake-up calls does the government need before it takes this issue seriously?
We're going to move on now to the controversial GAEC. That's the second of the good agricultural and environmental conditions under the Common Agricultural Policy conditionality, dealing with the protection of wetlands and peatlands. Aisling, farm organisations have expressed a lot of concern on this, but we understand that an appeals system for impacted farmers is due to be set up shortly. Can you tell us more on that?
Yes, Charles. Michael Maloney is a senior inspector in the Integrated Controls Division of the Department of Agriculture, and he was the guest speaker at an IFA meeting in Kerry this week. Now, he told farmers at the meeting that the department is hoping to have an appeals system for GAEC 2 in place shortly. Now, as you mentioned, GAEC 2, it's the conditionality standard under CAP related to the protection of peatlands and wetlands, and I suppose after putting it off for some years, it has changes come into force now in Ireland officially on May 1st, which means that any works carried out before that date do not come under the scope of this condition. Now, Michael Maloney reiterated that there are no additional actions for a farmer and they can continue to farm as normal under GAEC 2. And he said that under the condition, the maintenance of an existing drain is permitted and replacement is acceptable. But he said new drainage on never drained parcels of land which fall under GAEC 2 will require planning permission or an exemption from the local authority, which is actually currently the case under national legislation. And he said that deepening of existing drains or the extension of the drained area beyond what was previously in place is considered new drainage as well. Now, when it comes to ploughing, which has caused some controversy as well, he said that ploughing is permitted on GAEC 2 lands to a maximum depth of 30 centimetres on grass and arable land, which he said should not impact on farmers. And under GAEC 2 as well, ploughing for reseeding grassland will be permitted in every 4 years, and that annual ploughing is allowed on arable land. So there's around 35,000 farmers who've been contacted by the department in relation to the 540,000 hectares which are covered by this condition. And farmers and their advisors can check the AgFood portal to see if their land comes underneath it. Now, Maloney said that there will be an appeals mechanism established. He said they're going to have that in due course. And he said hopefully it'll be early next month, so early June. And he said farmers can appeal having their lands included under GAEC 2, but they'll have to provide evidence of soil samples and different evidence like that, showing that there isn't 30% organic matter and that the depth of the peat is not 30 to 45 centimetres. And he said that the only person who really needs to appeal this is those that basically want to do something on this undrained soils in 2025. He said they'll prioritise those cases because they don't have the capacity to deal with a large number of people or appeals, in his words, that just want to appeal it for the sake of it. So, he did note that, of course, GAEC 2 is in place under the current cap, but of course we've negotiations, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, going on now ahead of cap post 2027. And he said there's no guarantees if GAEC 2 or any of the other GAECs will feature in the cap beyond 2027. And I suppose one thing that he was very, very adamant about is that GAEC 2 is not a designation. And he said it was a classification for the basis of conditionality, and it's a baseline or a minimum. Now, Kerry IFA Chair Jason Fleming said that GAEC 2 was going to be a massive inconvenience for farmers who'd have to apply for planning permission for new drains or deepening existing drains on lands that are covered by this condition. And he said to Michael Maloney that, I know you don't like using the word designation, but it feels to us like a form of designation. And a lot of farmers in the room maybe felt that way as well. But Michael Maloney felt that maybe some farmers might have felt after the meeting and other meetings around the country that perhaps GAEC 2 wasn't going to be as impactful as maybe they were being led to believe.
Now, we're going to move on and talk about a topic that touches on animal welfare. But just before we talk about fox hunting, and while we're on the issue of animal welfare, it was confirmed this week that biosecurity measures relating to bird flu will be lifted in both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland from Saturday, which is May 31st, with Minister Hayden noting that the risk of bird flu is generally lower during the summer months than in the winter period. So positive news for flock keepers there. But moving on now, as I said, to fox hunting and the bill going through the Oireachtas at the minute to ban the practice. This is a controversial one, Aisling. Fox hunting is known to play a sort of social role in rural Ireland, and that's important. But at the same time, there is an animal welfare issue there as well. So what were the political developments this week?
Yes, Charles. So this week, People Before Profit Solidarity TD Ruth Coppinger announced that she wanted to introduce a bill in the Dáil seeking to ban fox hunting in this country. Now, the bill aims to amend the Animal Health and Welfare Act of 2013 to specify that fox hunting and related practices are banned and therefore cannot be considered as lawful hunting. Now, the Dublin TD told the Dáil that Ireland has become an outlier as fox hunting is banned in England, Scotland and Wales, and she believes that fox hunting is a cruel and inhumane so-called blood sport, and she said it clearly causes unnecessary suffering with packs of dogs chasing after a fox relentlessly, and she said it's obviously a very stressful and unnatural situation for the fox. Now, she did point to the fact that in 1998 the then minister approved a code of conduct for fox hunting hunting packs. But Deputy Coppinger said that this has eliminated none of the cruelty that makes fox hunting one of Ireland's most inhumane activities. And she said that foxes are still being dug out of the ground and tracked by trained terriers. And she said that the foxes are still being chased by packs of dogs, sometimes for hours, and torn apart when caught. And she said if a domestic animal was treated in this way, there would be an outcry. Now, she told the Dáil that there is public support both in urban and rural areas to ban fox hunting, and she cited a Red C poll to back up that. And she said the fox is a mammal that's native to Ireland and is part of our biodiversity, and she believes that fox hunting is of benefit to nobody. Now, two TDs indicated that they would be opposing the bill, and Deputy Coppinger stated that this was actually unprecedented, Charles, at this stage, because this would be the first stage when the bill would be introduced. And Deputy Coppinger said that she's introduced many controversial things as of other TDs, and she's never stopped a bill from going to second stage. And she said she's been told to put on her big girl pants and allow debate. But here we are having a stifling of the freedom of debate and freedom of speech. And she asked TDs and the government to reject the call to stop the bill progressing onto the second stage. Now, Independent Ireland TD Michael Collins was one of the TDs opposing the bill, and he told the Dáil that foxes are classified as a pest species. He said that there was up to 200,000 of the animals currently in the country, and he said we need some kind of control, because in his words, the next thing we'll be in the Dáil seeing if we can protect the rat, the mouse or whatever. And he said nobody wants to protect the human beings. That is the problem from what he can see here. And he said that foxes posed huge threats to farmers, and he said if Deputy Coppinger had been brought up in a rural area, she'd understand that. And he said how many times has he heard through the years that a fox had broken into a yard and destroyed every hen there. And he said they're also a threat to Ireland's native birds and young lambs, and he said we need to have control on foxes. And he said that under the current legislation there are potential punishments for animal welfare violations, including substantial fines and jail terms. Now, Independent Kerry TD Danny Healy-Rae was the other TD to oppose the bill going on to second stage, and he said he'd been contacted from every corner of Kerry by people wanting to stop this bill. And he said all of us living in rural parts of Ireland know the damage that the fox has done and is doing, and he said the numbers have increased to a massive amount altogether. Now, the TD said he was certainly opposing this bill and would call for a vote. Now, the government chief whip Mary Butler said that, as is normally the case with private members' business, the bill would not be opposed on first stage. She said that would be the process, and she said if the bill was listed for second stage, like any other bills, the government would then consider the matter at that point. So Ceann Comhairle Verona Murphy postponed the matter until Wednesday night, and then it was put to a vote that leave to introduce the bill would be granted, and that vote passed by 113 TDs voting in favour with 49 voting against, meaning that the bill now proceeds to second stage. But Charles, I think given the fact that this bill has hit opposition from the very get-go, I can imagine that it's going to face some stiff opposition when it reaches second stage now and the next stage of debating. But I know it's definitely a story that got a lot of reaction from our listeners and from our viewers and our readers on Agriland this week, and it's something that I suppose strikes a chord on both sides of the argument, so we'll see how it all plays out.
Yes, Aisling, it's likely to be a contentious one over the coming weeks and months, but that's all we have time for today. Just before we go, we just want to say if you're one of the expected 100,000 or so people travelling to the Bord Bia Bloom Festival over the coming days, safe travels and enjoy your day out. And if you're not travelling until later in the festival, or if you can't make it this year, you can check out our video on the event on Agriland.ie and the Agriland app, which really gives you a flavour of what's happening this year at Bloom. But that's where we'll leave it. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling and myself, enjoy the bank holiday.